The year is 1666. England, once a beacon of hope, now trembles under the dual threat of plague and despair. Our previous episodes unveiled the creeping horror of the Dracula Plague, a curse unlike any other. But even as the nation reeled from this invisible enemy, another catastrophe loomed on the horizon. London, the bustling heart of England, was about to face a trial by fire, quite literally. Horse-drawn carriages clatter over cobblestone streets. Merchants hawk their wares, their voices echoing through the crowded marketplace. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, fear lingers like a shroud. The stench of death, a grim reminder of the relentless plague, permeates the air. Little do they know a fiery inferno is about to be added to their nightmares. The Black Death, a cruel precursor to our current plight, had already ravaged London once before. Its memory, a chilling tapestry of suffering, was woven into the very fabric of the city. Now, the Dracula Plague, a far more insidious evil, stalked the streets. Its victims, drained of life, bore strange marks, fueling whispers of a supernatural affliction. Rumours spread like wildfire, more potent than any earthly flame. Some whispered of vampires, their fangs dripping with the lifeblood of the innocent. Amidst the terror and uncertainty, a new horror emerged. The Great Fire of 1666, a conflagration of unimaginable scale, was about to be unleashed. Even before the firestorm, London was a city divided. Opulence and poverty existed side by side, a stark testament to the inequality that festered within its walls. The aristocracy, cloaked in finery, seemed oblivious to the plight of the less fortunate. The River Thames, London's lifeblood, now served as a divider. On its north bank, sprawling mansions and elegant gardens showcased the wealth of the elite. To the south, overcrowded slums festered, a breeding ground for disease and despair. The relentless march of the plague, coupled with the growing discontent among the poor, had shaken the very foundations of faith. The night of September 2nd, 1666, began like any other in London. A gentle breeze rustled through the narrow streets, carrying with it the familiar scents of wood smoke and river water. But deep within the heart of the city, in the cramped quarters of Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane, a disaster was brewing. A smouldering ember, overlooked in the day's rush, ignited a pile of kindling near the bakery's oven. Flames, at first timid and hesitant, quickly grew bolder, licking at the dry timber of the building. Soon the bakery was engulfed in a raging inferno, casting an eerie orange glow upon the sleeping city. Wooden beams and thatched roofs, tinder dry after a long hot summer, became easy prey to the flames. As dawn broke, the true horror of the situation became apparent. A monstrous column of smoke, visible for miles around, rose from the heart of London. The air, thick with ash and the acrid smell of burning wood, was choked with the screams of terrified citizens. The fire, a ravenous beast, consumed everything in its path. Homes, shops, churches, even the Grand Guildhall. A symbol of London's civic pride crumbled before its relentless advance. The River Thames, normally a lifeline for the city, offered no escape. Burning debris carried by the wind transformed the water into a river of fire. Men, women and children risked their lives to save others, forming human chains to pass buckets of water from hand to hand. As the fire raged on, panic gripped the city. Thousands of desperate souls fled their homes, carrying whatever meager possessions they could salvage. The streets, choked with refugees and carts overflowing with belongings, became impassable. Many sought refuge on the open ground of Moorfields, a vast common north of the city walls. Others huddled in makeshift camps on the outskirts, their faces lit by the flickering glow of the distant flames. The air was thick with the sounds of weeping, the cries of lost children, and the mournful tolling of church bells. The overcrowded conditions in the refugee camps, coupled with the lack of food and clean water, created a breeding ground for disease. After 4 long days and nights, the fire finally began to subside. The wind, as if exhausted from its fiery rampage, died down, and the flames, starved of fuel, began to flicker and fade. By September 6th, the Great Fire of London was finally extinguished. In its wake, the fire left a scene of unimaginable devastation. Over 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and countless other buildings lay in ruins. The homes and livelihoods of over 70,000 people had been reduced to ashes. Yet amidst the rubble and despair, a glimmer of hope emerged. The fire, in its destructive fury, had also consumed the plague-ridden rats that infested the city. The ashes of the Great Fire still smouldered, a stark reminder of London's recent tragedy. Yet even as the city mourned its losses, the deep fissures that divided its people began to widen. The fire, like a cruel sculptor, had chiseled away the facade of unity, revealing the stark reality of social inequality. On one side stood the wealthy elite, their fortunes largely untouched by the inferno. Many had fled to their country estates, watching from a safe distance as the city burned. Now they returned to the ruins of London, their hearts filled not with empathy but with a cold detachment. The poor, on the other hand, faced a far grimmer reality. Stripped of their meagre possessions, they huddled in makeshift shelters, exposed to the elements and the lingering threat of disease. The fire had not only destroyed their homes, but also shattered their hopes for a better future. The rich stood on their hilltops, while the poor struggled in the rubble below. As the days turned into weeks, the initial shock of the fire gave way to a gnawing despair. The streets of London, once bustling with life, were now eerily quiet, haunted by the ghosts of those lost in the flames. The air, heavy with the stench of smoke and decay, carried whispers of hunger, sickness and despair. For the poorest of Londoners, survival itself became a daily struggle. Food and water were scarce, and the price of whatever remained soared beyond their reach. Many resorted to begging, their pleas falling on deaf ears. Disease, a constant companion to poverty, spread like wildfire through the crowded camps and makeshift shelters. The Dracula Plague, though weakened by the fire, had not been eradicated. The response of the authorities to the plight of the poor was a study in indifference. King Charles II, preoccupied with restoring order and asserting his authority, seemed oblivious to the suffering of his subjects. The rebuilding of London, he declared, would focus on grand avenues and majestic palaces, not on the squalid hovels that had once housed the poor. The new London must rise from the ashes, grander and more magnificent than before. We shall have wide avenues and majestic buildings, symbols of our resilience and strength. The church, too, seemed to have abandoned its flock. While some compassionate priests and nuns risked their lives to minister to the sick and dying, many others retreated behind the walls of their surviving churches. The promise of salvation, it seemed, offered little comfort in the face of such earthly suffering. The wealthy merchants and businessmen of London, eager to rebuild their fortunes, saw opportunity amidst the ashes. But their vision of a new London excluded the poor, who were viewed as an impediment to progress. As the year 1666 drew to a close, London stood at a crossroads. The Great Fire had left an indelible scar on the city's landscape and psyche, but it was the social divisions, laid bare by the fire's merciless flames, that truly threatened to tear London apart. On one side, simmering resentment among the poor threatened to erupt into open rebellion. The indifference of the elite, their callous disregard for the suffering of their fellow citizens, fueled a growing sense of anger and injustice. Amidst the ruins and despair, a spirit of resilience began to emerge. Ordinary Londoners, bound by their shared experience, began to forge new communities, offering each other support and solace in the face of unimaginable hardship. The year 1666 had tested the very soul of London. Plague and fire, a double-headed serpent of misery, had plunged the city into chaos and despair. For the Church, the bedrock of faith for centuries, this presented a crisis unlike any other. The grand cathedrals, once symbols of God's unwavering presence, now lay in ruins, consumed by the insatiable flames. The Archbishop of Canterbury, his voice heavy with sorrow, preached of divine retribution, of sins demanding atonement. But his words rang hollow in the ears of many. How could a loving God, they asked, unleash such suffering upon his own children? While the Church grappled with its own internal struggles, a different kind of inquiry unfolded within the hallowed halls of Oxford and Cambridge. Here, amidst ancient libraries and dimly lit laboratories, scholars and scientists sought answers in the realm of reason and observation. The plague, they argued, was not a manifestation of divine wrath, but a scourge of nature, a puzzle to be unraveled through meticulous study. They pored over ancient texts, searching for clues in the writings of Galen and Hippocrates. They dissected the bodies of the deceased, hoping to unlock the secrets of the deadly disease. Their quest, however, was met with suspicion and even hostility from some quarters. The Church, wary of any challenge to its authority, viewed these inquiries as bordering on heresy. To delve too deeply into the mysteries of nature, they warned, was to trespass on God's domain. As the scholars grappled with their intellectual pursuits, a different kind of struggle played out in the counting houses and marketplaces of London. The Great Fire had dealt a devastating blow to the city's economy, but it had also created opportunities for the shrewd and the ambitious. The rebuilding of London, they realized, presented a chance to reshape the city in their own image. They formed alliances with powerful nobles and lobbied the king for favorable contracts. Brick and timber, once mundane commodities, now commanded exorbitant prices. Some merchants, their consciences untouched by the suffering around them, exploited the situation for personal gain. They hoarded essential goods, driving up prices and pushing the poor deeper into despair. Others, however, saw an opportunity to rebuild London as a more just and equitable city. They advocated for fair wages for labourers, for affordable housing for the displaced, and for a more equitable distribution of the burdens of rebuilding. While the elite debated the future of London, the true work of rebuilding fell upon the shoulders of its ordinary citizens. Carpenters, bricklayers, labourers, their faces grimed with sweat and soot, toiled tirelessly amidst the rubble. The rhythmic clang of hammers, the rasp of saws, and the shouts of men coordinating their efforts became the soundtrack of a city rising from the ashes. They worked long hours, often for meagre wages, driven by a mixture of necessity and a deep-seated pride in their city. Many had lost everything in the fire, their homes, their possessions, and in some cases their loved ones. Yet they persevered, finding strength in their shared purpose and in the knowledge that their labour was essential to the city's survival. The women of London too played a vital role in the rebuilding effort. They cooked for the labourers, cared for the sick, and scavenged for materials in the rubble. Seeds of change. The year 1666 had been a crucible for London, a year of unimaginable hardship and loss. Yet even amidst the ashes, seeds of change had been sown. The fire, in its destructive fury, had not only consumed the physical city, but had also burned away old assumptions and hierarchies. The Church, its authority shaken, was forced to confront the limits of its influence in a world increasingly shaped by reason and scientific inquiry. The merchants, emboldened by the opportunities presented by the rebuilding, began to challenge the traditional power structures of the city. And among the ordinary citizens of London, the experience of shared suffering had forged a new sense of solidarity and a determination to build a better future for themselves and their children. The Great Fire, a tragedy of immense proportions, had also ignited a spark of hope, a belief that even from the ashes of destruction, something new and vibrant could emerge. The year 1666 had pushed London to the brink. The twin horrors of plague and fire had left their mark on the city's soul. Yet even amidst the ruins and despair, the indomitable spirit of humanity flickered. Londoners, tempered by adversity, refused to surrender to despair. The streets, once choked with the debris of shattered lives, slowly began to throb with a tentative pulse. From the ashes of their homes, survivors emerged, their faces etched with loss, but their eyes burning with a fierce determination to rebuild. Each sunrise brought a renewed sense of purpose. The task ahead was daunting, the road to recovery long and arduous. Yet, there was a palpable shift in the air, a collective resolve that transcended social strata. The will to survive, to rise above the ashes, pulsed through the veins of London. It was a spirit born of necessity, forged in the crucible of unimaginable hardship. In the aftermath of disaster, the bonds of community became a lifeline. Strangers shared meager rations, offering comfort and support to those who had lost everything. Makeshift shelters, cobbled together from salvaged materials, became havens of shared grief and resilience. The church, though wounded, played a vital role in fostering this sense of unity. In the shadow of ruined cathedrals, priests and nuns organized soup kitchens, distributed donated clothing, and offered spiritual solace to the bereaved. Community gatherings, once vibrant celebrations of life, took on a more somber tone. Around flickering candlelight, stories of loss and survival were shared. Tears flowed freely, and the weight of grief was momentarily lifted through shared experience. Musicians, their instruments salvaged from the wreckage, filled the streets with mournful melodies, their music a poignant reminder of the city's shared sorrow, but also a testament to the enduring power of human creativity. Amidst the widespread suffering, stories of extraordinary kindness and courage shone like beacons of hope. Ordinary individuals, their own lives shattered, performed extraordinary acts of selflessness. Neighbours risked their lives to pull survivors from burning buildings, their bravery defying the inferno that raged around them. Doctors and nurses, working tirelessly in makeshift infirmaries, tended to the sick and wounded, their compassion a balm on the city's wounds. Merchants, their own livelihoods in ruins, donated food and supplies to those in need, their generosity a testament to the belief that even in the darkest of times, humanity must prevail. These acts of kindness, often small and unheralded, became powerful symbols of resilience, reminding Londoners that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, the human spirit could endure. As the year 1666 drew to a close, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere of London. The initial shock and despair began to give way to a cautious sense of optimism. The plague, weakened by the fire's cleansing flames, finally began to recede. The rebuilding efforts, slow and arduous at first, began to gain momentum. From the ashes, a new London was emerging, a city scarred but not broken. King Charles II pledged to rebuild London as a grander, more magnificent city. Architects drew up ambitious plans for wide boulevards and stately buildings. The year 1666 will forever be etched in London's memory, a year of unparalleled hardship and devastation. The Dracula Plague, a relentless predator, stalked the city's streets, leaving a trail of sorrow and fear. And just as Londoners began to regroup, the Great Fire erupted, consuming their city in an inferno. Yet, amidst the ruins and despair, the indomitable spirit of humanity endured. Londoners found strength in their shared humanity. They displayed extraordinary acts of courage and selflessness. The year 1666 revealed the fragility of human life, but it also illuminated the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. The London that emerged from the ashes of 1666 was a city forever changed. The physical scars of the fire served as a constant reminder of the catastrophe, but they also became symbols of London's resilience. The Great Fire proved to be a catalyst for change. It swept away not only the physical structures, but also outdated social norms. The rebuilding efforts fostered a new spirit of innovation, and from the ashes, a new London arose, more vibrant and resilient.